Welcome to the Center of Light Radio with spiritual teacher, intuitive, musician, composer, and best-selling author of The Divine Principle, Anchoring Heaven on Earth, your host, Keith Anthony Blanchard.
Coast to coast, pole to pole, all around the world on the internet, thanks to the marvel of technology. I am coming at you live from my little guest house in Memphis, Tennessee. This is Keith Anthony Blanchard, and you are listening to Center of Light Radio, Center of Divine Unfoldment and Reinforcement, the superhighway to knowledge for that which is most important. That would be you. Power up and spread the light. It's Monday night. Strap in all my brother and sister astronauts as we launch for inner space. I want to tell you about this brand new program I just recently released to the public. It's called RPM, Recognize, Plug in, and Manifest Your Life. It is my lifelong work. And I am confident that if you implement this program, this yearly program, once a month, you get goodies from me. Your life will change, not because you are broken, not because you need to be fixed, only for the purpose of further expansion into deeper levels of bliss, greater ideas, ways you can begin to manifest those things in your life that you've been wanting, so to speak, be it a greater degree of spiritual peace, be it you're like playing in the physical world, you like things. Things are cool. I like things. Either way, go to centeroflightradio.com. At the bottom right-hand corner of the opening page, you will see a subscription form. Fill that out. It's for a newsletter, but it's also a way of letting me know that you would like to check out the RPM program. I promise you, if you fill out that newsletter box, let me know that you want it. I will not send you junk. I am not about sending my friends, my guests, my listening audience junk. I'm just not into that. I do a lot of research. And what I will be sending you through this newsletter program, and it expands my heart, it expands my consciousness, and I have no doubt whatsoever that in receiving this newsletter, as well as the RPM program, that it'll do just that for you as well. Also, while you're at centeroflightradio.com, just to the left of that same box, you will see a movie banner. And the meek shall inherit the earth, the prophecy realized, a movie I made about 8 months ago. I woke up one morning not knowing what to do with my day, and I hear my consciousness, Keith, make a movie. I'm like, what? And I put this thing together in about a month and a half, and it's doing quite well. Check that out. And also, finally, while you're at Center of Light Radio, check out the video archive tab. It's under Center of Light Radio tab. It's a subgroup. And it'll take you to all the past shows that I've done for the last year. And as of a couple of months ago, my listening audience reached over 1.25 million in a year. That is phenomenal. It gives me a good sign that Center of Light's going to be around for quite a while. Remember, if you're not at home and you want to hear your favorite show, hopefully that's Center of Light Radio or any of the fine programs you hear on the Inception Radio Network, go to the App Store on your phone and download the Inception Radio Network app for free. Everything is there at your command. Listen, live links, podcasts, news. It's full of tricks and a bunch of bells and whistles, which you need in your phone if you're Center of Light Radio fan. Let's get down to Center of Light Radio business. I want to tell you about my exciting guest. It came highly recommended by one of my producers of Center of Light Radio. Today my guest is Mr. Gerard Aartsen, and today we're going to also be gathering. I'm going to cut that out. Today my guest is Mr. Gerard Aartsen, and we're going to be speaking about a gathering of the forces of light. That is so me. Let me tell you about my guest. Mr. Gerard Aartsen has been a student of the Ageless Wisdom teachings for over 35 years. His research into teachings of the Masters of Wisdom resulted in a comprehensive and annotated, I'm just waking up from a long night. His research into the teachings of Masters of Wisdom resulted in a comprehensive annotated catalog, which he has published online as Our Elder Brothers Return, A History in Books, 1875 to present day. The author is a long-standing co-worker of Share International, a worldwide network of groups affiliated with British esotericists, Benjamin Krim. Wow, I have some connections with Benjamin myself, who is the main source of information about the return of the world teacher and the masters of wisdom now at the dawn of a new cosmic cycle. Gerard's articles are about the extraterrestrial presence on Earth, have been published in Share International Magazine and other publications, and he is a regular guest on radio talk shows in the USA, the UK, Australia, the Netherlands, and elsewhere about UFOs and related subjects. He also gives talks about the significance of the ET presence and its connection with the Ageless Wisdom teaching, and has lectured in America, Europe, and Asia. Gerard Aartsen, 1957, has a Master of Education degree from the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences, the Netherlands, where he has held a teaching position at the School of Education since 2001. In addition to education, the Ageless Wisdom teaching and the extraterrestrial presence on Earth, he also had a keen interest in the Renaissance and modernist art. And you can find more about my fantastic guest today at www.bgapublications.nl. Mr. Gerard Aartsen, welcome to Center of Light Radio, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I really enjoyed reading some of the things that stuck out for me in your bio. I never put the two together as far as Benjamin Krim with the alien stuff. Give me a little bit about that. How does that marry?
It's been there from the start, actually. In his very first book, on the very first page, Benjamin Krim, and this book was published in 1978-79, Benjamin Krim talks about his work with the people from space, the visitors from space. His work, maybe, I'm sure some listeners will have heard of his work as the herald for the return of the teacher at the beginning of this age of Aquarius. But except this time, the teacher will not be coming alone, but with a group of his masters of wisdom. His book was called The Reappearance of the Christ and the Masters of Wisdom, and obviously it addresses that topic in depth, as do all of his books. Except that in this book and in a few of his other books, he also goes into detail about the extraterrestrial presence, the UFOs, the visitors from space, and he gives details that are very hard to find elsewhere because of his direct connection with one of the Masters of Wisdom. Since 1959, who has prepared him for this mission that started 1974. But before that training started in 1959, he was actually working with the space people. And this was the 1950s, and most people interested in the extraterrestrial phenomenon will be aware that the 1950s started as the heyday of the contactee movement, the UFO, the flying saucer movement, as it was called then, quickly derided and defamed and ridiculed from the mid-1950s onward, because of the message of universal brotherhood and the emphasis on international cooperation and the dangers of nuclear power, nuclear technology, nuclear bombs, etc., that the various contactees were giving, not only in the United States, but in other places around the world as well. So Benjamin Krim was working with some of those space people himself, and he has said that he is not at liberty to say much about it, but because of his direct contact with one of the Masters of Wisdom and his ongoing contact, or very easy access, should I say, some people from space, allows him to give information that is not easily available to others.
How did you get into this field? Did you have an experience, be it in a waking night state, that you saw a craft and you were fascinated to know more? Have you had contact experience yourself in sleep realms of consciousness? What brought you into this field?
Well, my connection to this field is actually fairly recent, other than the fact that, I've always been fascinated by flying saucers and contactees and the information coming from Benjamin Creme. I've been involved, as you read in my bio, with Benjamin Creme's work since 1978 or something, and I've been a student of the books written by Alice Bailey and H.P. Blavatsky. It was only so I have a long history of reading this kind of material, and I remember reading George Adamski's book Inside the Spaceships, still one of the best books in the field, if you ask me, published in 1955 but republished several times. But I only seriously became interested in the field of ufology, if you will, when I found out a direct connection through George Adamski's very first book, little known, even though it's been in print for a very, very long time, up until as recent as, I believe, 2010 or 2008, and that was called Wisdom of the Masters of the Far East. And this is George Adamski, who is known worldwide as the first person to publish his story of contact with a being from outer space through the book Flying Saucers Have Landed, which he co-authored with Desmond Leslie, published in 1953. Other people had contact before him, apparently, but their stories only came out after his story was published, and he instantly gained worldwide fame and attention. So his first book, Wisdom of the Masters of the Far East, brought the two together, the field of the Ageless Wisdom teaching and the field of flying saucers, contactees.
Back in 1998, Gerard, I was teaching a spiritual class, and a friend of mine, a goofy girl, funny girl, comes up to me and asks me if I want to meet an alien being. And I thought she was just making a joke, but I can tell there was a note of seriousness there. So I said, absolutely. She said, follow me. So she brings me up to this 5-foot woman, 5'1" woman, very short stature of a person. And she turns around and says, Keith, I want you to meet Nucleus 8. And when this person turns around, Gerard, the voice that came out of this little lady's mouth was not feminine. It was no way it was contrived. It's not possible. I can see, I can intuit, and the being that was inside this little body was pretty amazing. 4 years I befriended this person. Been aboard its craft, grabs my hands in waking states of consciousness, yanks me out of my body. This is actually the first broadcast on Center of Light Radio. Now keep in mind, this 5'1" woman was married to a 40-year clinical psychologist. The marriage happened after some time, but she went there to him for help because of some past issues in her life. And this all started to surface, and I'd love for you to hear that interview. But all that being said, are you familiar with the series that's been on Gaia TV for the last couple of years now called Cosmic Disclosure?
No, I'm not. I can't say I am. Sorry.
If you get the opportunity, it's Gaia TV, GAIA-TV.com.
Yes.
It'll wow you. I'm in this field like you in other arenas as well, but I was just completely fascinated by installment after installment. This guy is interviewed by David Wilcock. His name is Corey Good. He's considered to be a whistleblower of whistleblowers. He has done a program called 20 and Back. You do 20 years, and when you're done, they bring you back, quote, in time to the same age when you left. He goes to the dark side of the moon. He's been doing it for eons, and he said there are like 22 alien civilizations that live on the backside of the moon. And the series just continues to go into these way out there things. I'm pretty impressed, so just heads up about that. You often refer to and quote the earlier contactees from the 50s, as you mentioned a minute ago, George Adamski. But why do you feel they are still relevant today?
George Adamski, Truman Bethlehem, Buck Nelson, Howard Menger, and there have been others, Orfeo Angelucci, and several others around the world. They were all given information that, if not at the time when it was given in the 1950s, at the height of the Cold War, with the McCarthy era still to begin in the United States, but with mounting tensions between the Soviet Union on the one hand and the United States on the other hand, the information that was given to them, if it wasn't relevant then, it is even more relevant now. It's about the awareness in humanity that we are one human race. And we are brothers and sisters of the one humanity on this planet. And all the information about alien abductions, hybrid breeding, and all kinds of atrocities that are ascribed now to the visitors were only coming out since the start of the disinformation campaign in the mid-1950s, when the authorities, government, military, and especially the economic powers behind the government started to see that this message that the contactees were asked to bring to the world, went straight, against their vested interests,
their plan
of keeping the world divided and making profits from that and growing their power and their influence from that. So they had, every interest in making these people look silly or deluded or ridiculous, and they did everything in their power, including plant stories, scary stories of abductions, etc. Which Dr. Stephen Greer has found evidence for, that these were actually perpetrated by government agencies. So the whole set of information that was given in the especially starting in the early 1950s, but even after the start of the disinformation campaign, new information was given to other contactees. In mid-1960s, a Dutch contactee was given very specific information about life on the planet of his hosts, as an example of how life could be here if we realize that we are one humanity. And we are not going to make it if we continue on this way of greed and competition and growing conflict, which will only result in more chaos and the eventual annihilation. And it's interesting when you, as I've done in my latest book, Priorities for a Planet in Transition, when you put the information that was given to the early contactees next to the events, economic developments, political developments, scientific insights, and other things that are happening in today's world, how prescient these visitors from space were, and showing us then in the 1950s how our systems would not be able to continue unless we come together and realize that we are one and give expression to that oneness. It's okay to have this beautiful awareness, have this sudden opening of your mind to the unity of life, etc. But if we don't give it expression in our political choices, in our life choices, then it will still lead us nowhere. And so the relevance of the teachings, you might almost say, that was given to the early contactees was, it's often been downgraded or disregarded as neo-religious or evangelical, but it's nothing to do with that. They're showing us a way of life as our own teachers from humanity, who have come out of humanity, the masters of wisdom in their various guises throughout the centuries and the ages, have shown us ways of life. They haven't come to start a new religion. Humanity, people around those teachers have started religions, but they merely came to show us a new way of life, expressing our innate oneness. And the UFOs are basically here to support us through this difficult time of transition, because what we see now, of course, is a major clash of energies between the old Piscean energies, the energies of the age of Pisces, which are withdrawing but are still dominant or very strong in this world, and the energies of Aquarius, which are growing in strength day by day. And our current structures, political, economic, financial, educational, etc., they're all, the result of our response to the energies of Pisces. And therefore, the new energies, we do not have the structures yet in which to respond to the new energies. And that is what creates this enormous tension in the world that we can see in every field of human endeavor.
As we look out and about today, we can probably guess that 85, 90%, hell crap, probably most of the entire world believes in beings from other dimensions or extraterrestrials, be it on whatever dimension that would be. But that being said, it's almost as an out of sight, out of mind. They believe it and it stops there. Now, when this thing does start to unfold, as it is now, but in a bigger way, when we are able to walk outside and see them, when it starts to hit home, even though these very people have believed in them, they still may not know how to swallow that pill. That being said, what sort of comfort do you think it's going to take for them to be at ease and trust that these beings who have far superior technology, far superior intellect, that can pull off such a venture to come to this planet from gosh knows where and what kind of technology, light traveling technology, they use an interdimensional technology, you would think there would be an automatic assumption that these beings are so smart, they're going to be kind to us. But even though people do believe in extraterrestrials, I think, sadly, and I hope I'm sadly mistaken, but that they're going to take this and run in a rabbit hole and hide. Your thoughts?
Yes. See, the extraterrestrials have been here for probably since the dawn of humanity on this planet. Their presence is now in modern days becoming more visible. It has been becoming more visible since the Second World War, since the invention of nuclear fission technology. That's not a coincidence, but that's because we don't know what we're dabbling with, and they're here in large part to help contain the enormous damage that the radiation of that nuclear technology does on planes of matter that we are not even aware of, the etheric planes of matter. But they have always, since our government turned down an offer, several offers, to present the reality of the extraterrestrial visitors to the world in exchange for technology and other forms of help, they have always been very cautious in contacting humanity, individual cases of humanity mostly, and they, so they operate from an enormous respect for our free will. They have more respect for our free will than we have ourselves, and
yeah, right.
we violate, transgress people's free will all the time, even if we're not aware of it, and they never will, because it's one of the first. Well, in the old science fiction series Star Trek, it's called the Prime Directive. But there is actually such a thing in the accounts of every case of authentic contact. You will find that the visitors state, well, people are asking us, why don't you show yourselves? Why don't you land and force peace on us, because we can't do it ourselves? Or why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And every time again, the answer is, but you have free will. We cannot force it on you. And moreover, if you remember the scary stories from Hollywood, the scary films and the scary books, if we would land with the best of intentions, thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people would die of shock.
It would go against the higher good and the agenda of expanding humanity. It would have the opposite effect. We keep talking about they, meaning the extraterrestrials. Who are they? Obviously, if one particular group is working with us and another particular group is working with us, they're all aware of each other. So somehow there has to be an alliance or a federation of who's making contact with what people. We'll take these on this level, and so forth. But who would those they be, Gerard?
Well, I speak obviously from my background as a student of the Ageless Wisdom teaching. And the Ageless Wisdom teaching says that life is one. There is only one life, not just on this planet, but throughout cosmos. The entirety of cosmos is the expression of the one life. So whoever comes here, maybe at a level of expressing that level of consciousness, or expressing that consciousness at a higher level than humanity or at a lower level than humanity. So they may be more advanced than we are, or maybe not quite as advanced as we are. It seems, according to the information from Benjamin Graham, that beings who were not quite so far advanced as we were able to visit us in all the days of old, but that has been there has been a stop put to that because of the very precarious situation that Earth is in now. This transitional time where humanity is facing a momentous choice, a historical choice. But they are our brothers, whether from the higher planets or the lower planets. Humanity is a universal occurrence throughout the cosmos, apparently. They may differ slightly in appearance, but the trunk, the four limbs, the head, it's and especially the soul imbuing that body with consciousness is makes for a human being, wherever they are from. According to my information, the visitors from space originate from other planets in our own solar system, because the Earth is one, humanity being only one aspect, not only one kingdom in nature, but also a divine aspect in the life of the heavenly being that expresses, of which the Earth is an expression. We are, you could say, the brain aspect. So is the solar system. It is one being with 7 sacred centers, 7 higher planets, higher than, no, I shouldn't say that. But in any case, 7 planets that form a similar function to the chakras along the human spine. So there's an analogy there, and whatever we can learn on this planet. And I'm well aware of people saying that they come from the Pleiades, they come from Arcturus, they come from wherever around the Milky Way and beyond. I personally don't think that makes sense, because if we know how far advanced Venus is in our system, and Saturn and Jupiter and Mercury, and Mars even to a certain extent, then we get an idea of how much there is for us to learn. And if there is so much for us to learn from within the solar system, what good would it do us if beings from systems, not just planets, but solar systems, star systems that are way beyond our not just our intellectual grasp, but our level of consciousness, there would be no possible way of conveying anything meaningful to us at this stage. So I think the people that visit us are mainly, according to the information from Adamski, but also many others, several others, from Venus and Mars and Saturn, some from Jupiter. That is who they are. And might I add that I personally made it a habit of never using the word alien, because even if they're from lower planets, they are still brothers and sisters. And alien is something maybe, alien to the human heart. Hate and xenophobia are alien to the human heart, but no one from anywhere in cosmos is alien to the human kingdom on this planet, because we are all one.
Yeah, it has such a negative connotation to it. And through my nightly excursions, I've in my bio, one of the descriptions of who I am is I use the words extraterrestrial target. And I use that because all of my life, Gerard, since I was a young boy, I've been having visits. And strangely, it parallels with what you said, but also what parallels with Corey Goode from the Cosmic Disclosure series I mentioned just a bit ago. A lot of my contacts and experiences with others, they are very much human. Very much human. I've been aboard many, many craft to see beings that look exactly like human beings. Now, there may be some differences as you described, but nonetheless, it's very much human.
Yes, and I personally haven't had any kind of experience that I'm aware of. I study the writings, the messages of the contactees. For the purpose of my research, I have defined 4 criteria by which I can decide whether a claim of contact is to be considered authentic or not. And these 4 criteria derive from the accounts of the original contactees from before the start of the disinformation campaign. Because once the disinformation campaign started, we can't be sure of anything. Who planted the information, who had an interest in making people scared or disbelieve the stories of the contactees. So with those 4 criteria based on the original accounts, we can then check later claims of contact to see, to what extent we might conclude they are authentic. And one very interesting one that I write at length about in my latest book is that of the Dutch contactee who wrote under the pseudonym of Stefan den Aarde, and he was actually a successful Dutch businessman. And he had a contact in around the mid-1960s in a large estuary in the southwest of Holland, when he was sailing his yacht with his family one summer. And he sailed his yacht into a semi-submerged UFO, flying saucer. And he saw a body floating, and he jumped out out from his yacht and saved put a lifeline on the floating body, when he saw somebody approach him walking through the water, apparently on the hull of the saucer that was just below the surface level of the water. And as a sign of gratitude, they offered him to share with him detailed information and unprecedented details of life and how life is organized on the planet that his hosts came from. They called it IARGA, and there's contactees, especially since the ridicule started in the mid-1950s, who have placed the origin of their contacts, their hosts, outside the solar system, or using names of planets that we don't know, like Clarion or IARGA or Ophir. And I believe they did that for a good reason, namely that those who maintained that their contacts were from planets within the solar system were ridiculed, often, or not often, but sometimes to death. So they had good reason to be careful, and their contacts even said it doesn't really matter. We don't ask you to go into the business of convincing people. But we want you to present this information and suggest that they bring in certain inexactitudes that people would be left free to believe or disbelieve. But at the heart of the message would speak to people who are open to it.
A few years ago, I had an experience during nightly sleep with the Clarions, and believe it or not, the leader of this mothership was a young girl, probably about the age of 8 or 9 years old, and she was very much a human in appearance, that's for sure. It seems you do not describe to the notion of alien abductions for experiments, gene harvesting, or hybrid breeding, etc.
No, I don't subscribe to that. You see, it doesn't make much sense if these beings have the technology to travel vast distances through space. If they have the ethics and the morals that are ascribed to them by the early contactees, that that impel them to help us, to support us. Without infringing our free will, and with respect for our freedom of thought, why would they be so backward in technology or in biology or in anything else that requires mutilating cattle or getting semen from humans or eggs? It doesn't stand to reason. It doesn't sound logical to me. And again, if you look at because if it were genuinely happening, then why wasn't it reported among one of the many original contactees? They never spoke of having been abducted or having been experimented on. It didn't happen. Cattle mutilations didn't happen before the disinformation campaign started. Of course, you will have people who will come up with mysterious cases and say, "See, it happened in the late 19th century or whatever." But at the time, it wasn't ascribed to visitors from space. These are all the pieces of evidence that were brought in after the fact of the disinformation campaign, and it has been so detrimental to the whole cause of understanding the subject of the extraterrestrial presence. It has done serious damage. But the space visitors are like the masters of wisdom, our elder brothers. Patience, they say, is their strongest weapon. And and they know that the truth will prevail. And they know that we will come round when the time is there and when we're ready for it.
Wow, very, very nice. Let's see. Like most of the earlier contactees, Gerard, you talk about space brothers. Isn't this precisely the same notion that gave ufology a bad name from the very beginning, to begin with?
Well, there you're touching on precisely, the point, the watershed moment in the modern history of ufology, if you will, because the bad name only came into effect once the disinformation campaign began to gain traction. Before that, the Space Brothers, George Adamski, the phrase more or less, and others used it. Benjamin Creme refers to the Space Brothers when he talks about the people that he worked with, the people from space. And if there's only one life, they must of necessity be our brothers and sisters from space. Yes, but brothers and sisters nonetheless. The ridicule did not originate from the terminology. The ridicule did not originate with the messages, very relevant messages. And I would, I've seen several books over the years, especially, starting in the 1990s, relegating the information of the original contactees and later contactees to domain of religion,
interview.
so we don't have to take it seriously. That promises salvation, and you don't have to think or do anything for yourself. Well, go back to the original accounts, and you will see that is absolute nonsense. These people, either the authors who say they are neo-religious, the original accounts, either they haven't read the original accounts, or they have maliciously thwarted and distorted the original accounts. Because I went back to those original books and I take literal quotations, one after another, from dozens of books. And as I show in Priorities for a Planet in Transition, there's nothing religious about it. It's all about creating justice and freedom for everyone in the world. And it's not about promising salvation and luring people into some kind of delusional state of bliss that is never going to come. It's nothing of that kind. It's so realistic, it's so practical, and at the same time it's inspiration. Yes, it is inspiring, absolutely. No doubt about it, and I wouldn't deny that. But you can inspire people to change their own lives on their own planet, or you can take those inspiring stories, very practical at the same time, and distort them and make people believe that, they're really religious, a bit ridiculous if people still take them seriously. Go back to those accounts, as I did, and say that again. My book proves these people wrong once and for all.
What is it the power factions are trying to keep us from discovering? Who we are on a greater level, because that would induce our liberation. It seems like maybe these people, the elite, are actually trying to harvest us. Versus, what is it they're trying to keep us from? What kind of realization is it you think they're keeping us at bay from?
I'm not so sure if they're trying to keep us from anything other than the fact that they realize change is at hand. People are waking up, and as soon as enough people wake up and stand up for justice and their freedom, that will mean a sea change in the world, and especially in the gross inequality in the world. Of course, the elite has everything to lose at the moment because they already hold the majority of the natural resources and the food and all the, apart from all the production, the factories and everything that you need for producing food and goods and artifacts, they also yield the greatest influence on the democratic process. Many of us, although the numbers are fast dwindling, still believe that we live in democracies, etc. But there's nothing much democratic about our current system, because we are constantly influenced, and the politicians are influenced to side with the corporations, so justice and freedom at the moment are almost like goods that you purchase on the market if you are lucky enough to be wealthy, to the extent that you can afford them. If you're rich, you don't have to fear anything. You can buy the justice you think belongs to you. But if you're poor, even the legal assistance programs that were set up from the 1960s and 70s to help people at the lower income level, they've been taken out of existence almost. So there is no justice. There is no freedom for people. So what the elite is trying to do is maintain their hold on society and on the economy and the financial system, so that they won't lose their power and their wealth. But of course, the system as it stands, it is about to disintegrate and to crash. More and more economic observers, market analysts, etc., are aware that what we're looking at when we look at the stock exchanges and economic reports from around the world is a facade. It's make believe. It's a house of cards. And we're tricked into believing it's still standing, but it's basically crumbling before our eyes. That's what they're prevent us from finding out. But the economic crash is, there's so many people now, experts, not people like me or Benjamin Graham or whoever, saying that it's going to happen. Economic experts, one after the other, who are saying it's incredible that it hasn't happened yet, but it will happen any minute now. And once that happens, I believe, with Benjamin Graham and several others, that humanity will come to its senses, especially humanity in the Western world, of course, because we stand to lose the most when these economic financial systems crash. It's not the people in the third world countries that they will suffer too, again, of course, as they have done ever since decolonization, but the current systems, we stand to lose the most by the way we have organized life on this planet and in our societies. And when the computer systems fall and all those things happen, we might be going through a difficult time, but it will bring us to our senses. And fortunately, because many people then ask me, but will that not lead to the Third World War or Civil War or whatever? There may be some painful instances, but there have been painful instances, and there are painful instances going on now in many countries, with people who have no responsibility for what is going on there. Syria, the whole refugee crisis. So there will be painful instances perhaps, but we should remember that help is at hand. The world teacher stands ready to make himself known. His group of masters of wisdom, unprecedented. Well, since 98,000 years since they first removed themselves from visible activity in the world. They've always guided, inspired us from behind the scenes, sending teachers age after age into the world. But unbeknownst to humanity, we were largely unaware of the existence of this next kingdom up in nature. But they're here, ready to inspire us, and the space visitors are here in support of this momentous event in human history. And once our systems crash and crumble, the world teacher will step forward, and when he declares himself, that will be the most extraordinary day in human history, because he will telepathically make a report between himself and every individual human being on this planet, and give his message of the oneness of humanity and the need to cooperate and to find new ways of not only coexisting but living together in a way that everyone benefits and everyone has a future prospect, not just for themselves but for their children as well. And it is really quite simple, he says. It's just a matter of sharing what we have already. We don't need to grow the economy even more, deplete the planet of its natural resources even more. All we need to do is share what we have. It will make for a simpler life. It will make for a far less stressful life in the Western world, but it will make for a life of human dignity around the world for everyone, all 7.5 billion of us on this planet. There's no one who doesn't have the right to a decent human life, and there's no reason why anyone wouldn't have a human decent life, given the wealth on this planet. There's a wealth of natural resources and a wealth of food. There's actually a 10% surplus of food even now, as we speak, but most of it, of the surplus, is left to rot in warehouses because people who need it don't have the money to buy it. And that's one of the major flaws in our system.
Center of Light Radio, Keith Anthony Blanchard, your host. Today, my guest is Mr. Gerard Aartsen. We are speaking about a gathering of the forces of light. Gerard, would you please give out your contact information to our listening audience so they can find out more about you and what you're into, sir?
People can find out all about me and my work, especially the articles that I write and the books that I've published on my website, www.bgapublications.com. brotherhood.nl. They can't order my books from there, but my books are available from all the major online the booksellers, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Waterstones around the world. My books have also been translated into Dutch and Japanese and French. And I list my latest ventures in radio interviews and talks, etc., on my website.
Have you ever heard of a lady by the name of Dorothy Izot? She has a documentary film that she's been recording these appearances of craft since the 70s. Now, if you saw this woman, this 80-year-old woman, you can see it. I mean, it's obvious. If anyone has any vision at all, you can just see that she has no agenda. In fact, the only reason this came public is because her daughter went behind her back and brought this to light. She had these old 8mm cameras, and she's filming these things, and they begin to talk to her telepathically, telling her, go to this side. She had cameras all around her house, so that any given moment when they would appear. And she has over 30,000 some odd feet, some ridiculous number of these experiences. That being said, on this program that I've seen, this documentary, she has these pictures of these craft, and though the pictures are static photographs, if you was to photograph this picture, the light phenomena coming off of this picture would continue. It would not be confined to the actual experience. That being said, tell me about some of the extraordinary photographs in your book, Here to Help, UFOs and Space Brothers, of an extraterrestrial pilot in the control cabin of the flying saucer.
Yes, that's interesting, actually. I found these in two rare books by an Italian diplomat by the name of Alberto Perego. Alberto Perego was a career diplomat in the service of the Italian government. And high social standing, but also very interested in the flying saucer phenomenon. And he kept track of any kind of report that he could find in the Italian media or foreign media, and started writing about it and published copied facsimile prints of these newspaper reports in his books. But the interesting thing is that he was not only the Italian national contact for George Adamski's Get Acquainted program. That was an international network that George Adamski had set up on the advice of his space contacts, and Alberto Perego was the Italian national contact. But he was also one of the members, so to speak, of what has become known as the Amicizia case of contact in Italy that started in 1956. Amicizia is Italian for friendship, the friendship case. It's a very interesting and inspiring documentary available for free on YouTube, the friendship case or the Amicizia case, about 50 minutes long. And it tells the basic story. Of course, it's a very complex story and a book. It first came to light internationally in 2009 with the translation, the English translation of a book by one of the proponents. One of the protagonists, actually, called Mass Contact, the book, 2009. Alberto Perego was one of over 120 Italians who were involved in regular contact with visitors from space who were working and living in underground bases around Italy, but also in other countries around Europe. Through his contacts in that group of Italians, he probably also knew the Italian journalist Bruno Gibaudi, who was a science and aviation writer, journalist. I believe it was Gibaudi who was allowed to take some of these pictures of an extraterrestrial pilot and the inside of a flying saucer when it was made visible landed and made visible. And Alberto Perego published these photographs in his books. And these books, because they were never published, translated into English, most people have forgotten about them, and they're quite rare. I fortunately managed to find out about them and obtain a copy, so that I could reproduce the photographs for the general good of UFO research. So here we see photographs of an extraterrestrial pilot. I've reproduced 2 of the 3 that I know about, and 8 or 12 photographs of the interior of a spaceship, a flying saucer, in fact. But of course, on the dense physical plane, or else it would be difficult to photograph with our equipment. And in fact, of course, the UFOs and life on the other planets in our system does not exist on the dense physical planes of matter, but on the higher, the subtle planes of matter, known in the Ageless Wisdom as the etheric planes of matter. But for the purpose of visits, for the purpose of sightings, for the purpose of contacts, they can lower the rate of vibration of their atoms or subatomic atomic particles to a degree that we can see them. They fall into our range of vision, and that explains why.
Yeah, within our consciousness spectrum. Yeah.
Yeah, and that explains why they can suddenly be visible and suddenly be gone, because for them it's just a matter of lowering the rate of vibrations.
Yeah.
And in fact, we have several avant-garde scientists, as I call them, who have pointed to these various aspects of these subtle planes of matter. And in fact, if we look at what science says, what it knows about the known universe, it says that 96% of the known universe, we call it dark matter and dark energy, because we have no idea what it is. So there's a good possibility that the notion of the etheric planes of matter, as the Ageless Wisdom teachings call it, is a reality.
Yeah, I love the subject of dark matter. It's the space. I mean, people think space is nothing, but it's full of lots of juicy. It's full of lots of things. We are slowly but surely. Gerard, we're coming to the top of the hour, but I can tell that you are just passionate about your research and diving into this work. You love what you do, don't you, sir?
I do, yes. I think it's fascinating, and because there has been so much disinformation and misinformation, often deliberate, often also, people who were probably given information and asked to spread it deliberately, false information. So I think the info that I gather, that I unearth from the original accounts, and what I do with it, placing it next to relevant recent information developments, etc. I think that I'm trying to help to set the record straight in this respect.
We have time for one more thought. Gerard Aartsen, would you give us a final thought, something that might prepare, to use a word, our listening audience for what may come, and how they can find a balanced posture in what to do when this really begins to take off?
Yes, well, as I mentioned it already, but people should be prepared that this life as we know it will not continue for very much longer, simply for the fact that the systems that we know, this financial, economic, social systems, no longer work. The political systems don't work anymore, since the polarization in the world is so strong, and it's forcing us, humanity, to a crucial choice. And when those systems crash, the choice will be presented to us one way or another. I believe it will be through the presence and the emergence of the world teacher by name Maitreya. And the choice will be, are we going to continue and rebuild the crashed systems on the old premises of of greed and competition and corruption and chaos and conflict and eventual self-annihilation? Or do we choose the other way of sharing, cooperation, creating justice and trust and peace and freedom for everyone? Because we have the stories, we have the accounts, we have the examples from our brothers and sisters from space that it is possible, and how to do it, very detailed. And when that time comes, I think it is important that we, find in our hearts the connection with the oneness of humanity, and make the right choice and stand up to lead our leaders into the future along the right path of sharing and cooperation. But we have to make known our choice, what we stand for, and I hope that we'll, and I'm quite certain, or else there wouldn't be such a large show of support from the Masters of Wisdom and the World Teacher and the space brothers and sisters in support of this time, humanity at this time. We will make the right choice, but we will have to do it ourselves. No one is here to save us. The World Teacher can't save us. The Space Brothers can't save us. The Masters can't save us. We can only save ourselves, and that is through participation and making known unambiguously what we stand for. And justice and freedom is what we need to stand for, I think.
Gerard Aartsen, thank you for being a wonderful, informative guest here on Center of Light Radio. Please stay in touch with me. Let me know what you're doing, what you're learning, as you can pass that on in turn to our listening audience. Thank you again for being here, sir.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. Thank you, Keith.
Absolutely. Everyone, my guest, you can find more about him at www.bgapublications.nl. Mr. Gerard Aartsen. Keith Anthony Blanchett here, your host of Center of Light Radio, airs every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Remember, when you're laying down at night and you have nothing to do, you might as well do a little bit of something. You're breathing anyway. Why not breathe consciously? Breathe in and out. Breathe with the intention that you want something greater than you've always known. And trust me, you do this often, you will begin to tap into something that is the real you, the essence of who you are. That is, as Gerard said, that who is connected to the one life that permeates the entire cosmos, the entire universe, the entire universes, the omniverses. It's everywhere all the time. It's everything you see. It's everything you hear. It's all of it. That's who you are, confined into a body. But can you break out of the mind? That's the gig. Break through the ceiling of thought. Meditation will help you find that space of serenity, where you will hear the profound voice and that profound stillness. Creator, source, God, life force, whatever term you choose to call it, meditation is the key. My name is Keith Anthony Blanchett. I bid you all a wonderful evening. Peace, love, and light. Ease into bliss.